Markets Now is brought to you by the 5-year anniversary of Brevant Seeds. Here's to 5 years of not just winning, but collecting one game-changing W after another. See all of our wins at brevant.com/wins.
Corn ending lower and into contract lows on Tuesday after the WASI with soybeans seeing a nice gain. And Brian Splitt is joining us with analysis. Brian, let's talk about the corn market. First of all, you had a 1 billion bushel increase in production from last month. How do you think the market handled it?
Michelle, you get production to jump more than 1 billion bushels in a single report, and the market's down 15 cents. I think it handled it pretty well. And maybe, if we kind of use last year as a reference point, December corn made a low at 385. And the carryout number that we got on the August report a year ago was 2.037 billion bushels. So when you take into account all of the extra yield we got on this report, the extra acres, and so that was a jump on 4.6% from trend on corn yield. And now our carryout's only 80 million bushels higher than it was on the August report a year ago. So if the belief is that this yield is going to be the high, kind of watermark for yield, and maybe we're going to see the crop come back off of this area because of August weather, I don't know that we need to go a whole lot lower than we did last year. It'll be really interesting to see what numbers the market starts to talk about for yield right now relative to what we got today.
So, Brian, do you think that this is the largest yield number that we're going to see on corn, especially since we haven't done any field surveys yet?
The tough thing using last year as a reference, we had a very dry August last year, and the USDA still did raise yield on paper in September and in October before making a very small revision lower in November and then the big one in January. So we could still see the USDA go incrementally higher from here. I don't think it's going to be anything material. But again, a year ago, we had that dry August. It took the top end off the crop, and we went down eventually to a 179.3. So if you take the USDA's high yield estimate last year and then where they ended up on a final basis and take that percentage drop and take that off of today's yield number, it actually takes you right back to a 184, which is where a lot of the trade really thought we would be today. So I still think there's a very good possibility. Maybe today wasn't the high yield, but I think with the way that some of the weather looks like in the Eastern Corn Belt, the way that we're pushing the crop along with high overnight temperatures, stuff that you just won't see on the satellite imagery, I do think there's a very good shot that come January, much like last year, we're lower than where we are right now.
Right. So demand was also pegged at a record level. Do you think it's being overstated at this point? Because, boy, if it wouldn't have been for that, this thing could have looked a lot uglier.
Yeah, so one thing that the USDA did not do today that I think a lot of the trade was still looking for on a world front was the increase in the safrinha corn size of their crop. And they just didn't do that. So they really could have given us a triple whammy today with an increase in corn acres, increase in corn yield, and then an increase in Brazil safrinha crop. Maybe that increase may come in the future, maybe not, but there's really not a reason at this point to say our exports are too high on the USDA balance sheet. Our export book right now for new crop is tremendous. So the signal right there is no, it's running fine.
So new contract lows though today, regardless of whether you thought the market handled it well. And so do we have to go lower to price into 2.1 billion bushel ending stocks or not?
Reference last year, 2.037, we went to a 385. We're at a 2.117 right now. Do we need to go to 385? It's not very far away. Could we go a little bit lower? Absolutely. The market is in a downtrend. I expect us to probably bounce a little bit from here. I think you probably could see September corn bounce back up to test 379, 380 before maybe falling back down again. But it's probably going to be sluggish here for a little bit. We do have a crop tour next week, and that's going to be the next really hard data, and I think we're going to get real field data. Are there actual problems in the field that the satellite imagery doesn't pick up on? And that might kind of readjust the market's assessment of what the yield is going to be. So, yes, we could absolutely go a little bit lower. I just don't know if we need to go materially lower from where we are right now. And I will tell you that there's kind of a lower channel line on September corn, and we went and hit that line on the lows today, right just under 370. So I do expect a recovery bounce back up towards the downtrend around that 380 area and see how we go from there.
So USDA raised soybean yield to 53.6 bushels per acre, which is a record, but ending stocks only 290 million bushels. How bullish is that?
Well, I mean, you start taking yield back down from there if there's a thought that the crop isn't finishing great across the corn belt, and you're going to have carry out very quickly, start to dwindle into the mid twos. The caveat of that would be, okay, China hasn't come in and bought beans, and they're non-existent. You would argue that, boy, without China, exports are still running pretty solid. Maybe China is doing some pass-through buying of other countries. I don't know if that's the case or not. Very plausible, but I think if there's a concern from China, all of a sudden that we had the acres go down and the yield went up and our carryout estimates went down, and we know that last year's Brazilian crop was about 154 million tons. This year's crop is 169 million tons, so that's 15 million tons extra to work with. China's imports last month were a little over 11 million tons, so let's just say roughly 10 million tons a month. They started buying July of last year. And if they've got an extra 15 million tons to work with out of Brazil, maybe that pushes it back a month and a half or so. I think China's going to come in and start buying late this month, early September, maybe sooner. And the charts right now are looking good. I'll tell you what also looks really good is the spreads in soybeans, nearby November versus January versus March versus May versus July, the commercial spreads, new crop November versus next year's November, Nov. We've seen some big gains in these spreads through the post on social media yesterday by President Trump, and then through the report today. So these spreads right now are saying that this market may have seen some very strong lows. And if we start to think carryout's going to be handily below 300 million bushels, if China does start to show up, we're going to need to go higher than we are right now. We should not be at $10 beans.
Yeah, how much higher? We've already tacked on 45 cents the last couple of days, and we're quickly running up into some chart resistance, aren't we?
Right. So until you get front month beans above $11, that's the big, big shelf above us. So at this point, you get a move up to the 1070 to 1080 area on a front month basis, which is very quickly going to be the September contract. That has been front month resistance. So I don't know if we have the gusto to get there, but in the short term, a move from low end of the range to the upper end of the range, and we seem to have been doing that every 2 to 3 months. So if we made a move to the low end of the range in July and we start to go back to the upper end of the range in August into September, that might take you back up into that 1070, 1080 area. That's the area, if you're patient, I'd be trying to shoot for. But the market, in the report today didn't give you a reason to feel very bearish about soybeans right now.
Right. Wheat market was also lower, and of course we did get a little bit of an adjustment lower in ending stocks in sum total by about 20 million bushels. But was wheat just hinged to corn today?
I think so. I mean, basically in wheat, you had a small increase in the winter wheat production that offset the decrease in the spring wheat production. So stocks went down minimally, but they did go down. I do think the additional feed grain aspect of it, the numbers that we got in corn, just put a weight on wheat. And I think you're also seeing spreading, right, where they're buying beans and selling wheat. They're buying beans and selling corn. So that probably exacerbated today's moves.
What about the cattle market? We had that wicked reversal day on Friday, but we've built on it. And especially today, does it look like we could go back and retest the contract highs here?
Yeah, Michelle. So what we did Friday was basically the same move that we had the previous week. You made a new high, you had a very aggressive profit-taking event the very next day, and then you stabilized and you went up and made some new highs. So I think this market's probably in store for a new high, probably just by a hair, and then maybe we see another wave of profit-taking. I think this is behavior that we want to be aware of, where if we start to see new highs by a buck or two, and then another big wave of $6 lower on futures. That might kind of give us an idea that the funds are starting to get in an atmosphere where they want to take profit, especially you see a lot of volatility at these upper areas, a lot of whipsaw. That might be another indicator. But I would suggest that with the sell-off that we had Friday, the sharp recovery we've already had above yesterday's highs, we probably, at least in the short term, are going to go look at the highs we made last week and maybe try and poke into a new high would be my guess.
Well, and that's especially going to be true if we get cash higher again this week, right? Because of the big discount with the futures.
Yeah, I mean, August still has that issue, right? Where August is trading at a price, cash is at a price, and August is going to be expiring late in the month. So That's still part of the mechanism of the market, is this August wanting to go where cash is. And when it gets to a discount on these profit-taking events, at least their front month contract is going to want to go back to those cash levels.
Absolutely. It has been a wild ride for sure. All right. Thanks so much. That is Brian Splitt with agmarket.net, and that's Markets Now.
You were right.
You were right.
You were right.
Well, you were right.
When you choose your seed brand, there's winning, and then there's...
You were right. Should have gone with Brevant seeds.
When you choose Brevant seeds, you don't just win, you get to be right. Don't just win. Talk with your retailer or visit Brevant.com/win to get started.